Trafalgar and the Death of Nelson. From the main peak of the flagship Victory hung out Admiral Nelson's famous signal, "England expects every man to do his duty," an inspiring appeal which has been the motto of English warriors since that day. The fleet under the command of the great Admiral was drawing slowly in upon the powerful naval array of France, which lay awaiting him off the rocky shore of Cape Trafalgar. The year 1805 was one of threatening peril to England. Napoleon was then in the ambitious youth of his power, full of dreams of universal empire. Gigantic had been his preparations. Holland and Belgium were his, their coastline added to that of France. In 100 harbours all was activity, munitions being collected and flat-bottomed boats built, in readiness to carry an invading army to England's shores. Meanwhile, the allied fleets of France and Spain were to patrol the Channel, one part of them to keep Nelson at bay, the other part to escort the flotilla bearing the invading army. While Napoleon was thus busy, his enemies were not idle. The warships of England hovered near the French ports, watching all movements, doing what damage they could. Lord Nelson keenly observed the hostile fleet. To throw him off the track, 2 French naval squadrons set sail for the West Indies, as if to attack the British islands there. Nelson followed. Suddenly turning, the decoying squadron came back under a press of sail, joined the Spanish fleet, and sailed for England. Nelson had not returned, but a strong fleet remained under Sir Robert Calder, which was handled in such fashion as to drive the hostile ships back to the harbour of Cadiz. Full of the spirit of battle, he hoisted his flag on the battleship Victory and set sail in search of his foes. There were 27 line of battleships and 4 frigates under his command. The French fleet, under Admiral Villeneuve, numbered 33 sail of the line and 7 frigates. Napoleon, dissatisfied with the disinclination of his fleet to meet that of England, and confident in its strength, issued positive orders, and Villeneuve sailed out of the harbour of Cadiz and took position in 2 crescent-shaped lines off Cape Trafalgar. As soon as Nelson saw him, he came on with the eagerness of a lion in sight of its prey. Down came the great ships, Collingwood in the Royal Sovereign, commanding the lee line, Nelson in the Victory, leading the weather division. Nelson wore that day his admiral's frock-coat, bearing on the breast 4 stars, the emblems of the orders with which he had been invested. His officers beheld these ornaments with apprehension. There were riflemen on the French ships. He was offering himself as a mark for their aim. Yet none dare suggest that he should remove or cover the stars. "In honour I gained them, and in honour I will die with them," he had said on a previous occasion. On came the English fleet, like a flock of giant birds swooping low across the ocean. Like a white flock at rest awaited the French 3-deckers. Collingwood's line was the first to come into action, Nelson steering more to the north, that the flight of the enemy to Cadiz in case of their defeat should be prevented. Straight for the centre of the foeman's line steered the Royal Sovereign, taking her station side by side with the Santa Ana, which she engaged at the muzzle of her guns. It was not long before the 2 fleets were in hot action, the British ships following Collingwood's lead in coming to close quarters with the enemy. As the Victory approached, the French ships opened with broadsides upon her, in hopes of disabling her before she could close with them. Not a shot was returned, though men were falling on her decks until 50 lay dead or wounded, and her main topmast with all her studding sails and booms had been shot away. The Victory was now well in. Firing from both sides as she advanced, she ran in side by side with the Redoutable of the French fleet, both ships pouring broadsides into each other. On the opposite side of the Redoutable came up the English ship Temeraire, while another ship of the enemy lay on the opposite side of the latter. The 4 ships lay head to head and side to side, as close as if they had been moored together, the muzzles of their guns almost touching. So close were they that the middle and lower deck guns of the Victory had to be depressed and fired with light charges, lest their balls should pierce through the foe and injure the Temeraire. And lest the Redoutable should take fire from the lower deck guns, whose muzzles touched her side when they were remote, the fireman of each gun stood ready with a bucket of water to dash into the hole made by the shot. While the starboard guns of the Victory were thus employed, her larboard guns were in full play upon the Bucentaure and the huge Santissima Trinidad. The Redoutable, after her first broadside, had closed her lower deck ports lest the English should board her through them, but her tops, like those of her consorts, were filled with riflemen whose balls swept the decks of the assailing ships. One of these struck him on the left shoulder, piercing the epaulette. "They have done for me at last, Hardy. My backbone is shot through." He spread his handkerchief over his face and his stars. The cockpit was crowded with the wounded and dying men. Over their bodies he was carried and laid upon a pallet in the midshipman's berth. All that could be done was to fan him and relieve his intense thirst with lemonade. On deck the fight continued with undiminished fury. The English star was in the ascendant. Ship after ship of the enemy struck, the cheers of the crew of the Victory heralding each surrender, while every cheer brought a smile of joy to the face of the dying veteran. The captain dared not leave the deck. More than an hour elapsed before he was able to come down. He grasped in silence the hand of the dying admiral. "I'm a dead man, Hardy. I'm going fast. Let my dear Lady Hamilton have my hair and all other things belonging to me." Captain Hardy grasped his hand again, the tears standing in his eyes, and then hurried on deck to hide the emotion he could scarcely repress. 15 minutes elapsed before Captain Hardy returned. "How many of the enemy are taken, I cannot say," he remarked. "The smoke hides them, but we have not less than 14 or 15. "That's well," cried Nelson, "but I bargained for 20. Anchor, Hardy, anchor!" he commanded in a stronger voice. "Will not Admiral Collingwood take charge of the fleet?" hinted Hardy. "Not while I live, Hardy," answered Nelson with an effort to lift himself in his bed. "Do you anchor!" Hardy started to obey this last order of his beloved commander. "Take me home that I may be buried by my parents, unless the king shall order otherwise. And take care of my dear Lady Hamilton, Hardy." The weeping Captain knelt and kissed him. "Now I am satisfied," said the dying hero. "Thank God I have done my duty." Hardy stood and looked down in sad silence upon him. "God bless you, Hardy," came in tones just above a whisper. Hardy turned and left. He had looked his last on his old commander. "I wish I had not left the deck," said Nelson, "for I see I shall soon be gone. Remember that I leave Lady Hamilton and my daughter Horatia as a legacy to my country." Words now came with difficulty. "Thank God I have done my duty." They were his last words. Meanwhile, Nelson's prediction had been realized. 20 French ships had struck their flags. The victory of Trafalgar was complete. Napoleon's hope of invading England was at an end. Nelson, dying, had saved his country by destroying the fleet of her foes. Never had a sun set in greater glory than did the life of this hero of the Navy of Great Britain, the ruler of the waves.